Yeah, well, welcome everybody to our summer WestGrid Town Hall on Friday, July 13th, Friday the 13th. So hopefully everything will go well today. Yeah, thanks for, we've got quite a few people on the list, so thanks for joining in this sort of in the middle of the summer. I think we got some interesting stuff going on, but first, just some of the admin things. You can ask questions there. It's probably a good idea if you turn off your mics and such, and you can ask on the chat window if you'd like to ask a question, and feel free to ask questions in the middle of things. Anything else there, Aaron, I should mention? I think, yep. So quick outline. Yeah, we've got a few things to talk about here. We've got a guest speaker for the Federated Research Data Repository. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about RAC, the Resource Allocation Competition, and that's essentially just to sensitize you all that it's coming up again, and we have to get going on it. Then some updates, expansion ideas, and Aaron's going to talk about the user survey results and some future opportunities. So I'm going to start with our guest speaker, Lee Wilson. Lee Wilson is the service manager from Portage, which is a group of library or run by libraries, and it's about the research data management end of things. One of those things that's now on everybody's mind. I think every institution has some kind of research data management approaches to store and share all this wonderful research data that we've got. And for the last couple of years, Compute Canada has had a project to think about a national scale repository. Lee is actually from AceNet, from Atlantic Canada. Lee, I think you're in Halifax, are you?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So without further ado, Lee, I'm looking forward to hearing about FRDR. Yeah.
Fantastic. Hello, Patrick, and thanks so much for having me on today. Just while I give the presentation, I'm going to mute my camera so you're not distracted by ugly mug while we go through the FRDR slides. You can go to the next slide, Aaron. So the Federated Research Data Repository project, or FRDR as we fondly call it, is a scalable federated platform for digital research data management and the discovery of research data. And it has three sort of main pillars that I'll talk about today very quickly during my presentation. The first is discovery, the second is deposit, and the third is preservation. We can go to the next slide. But before I dive into those, I think it needs to be said that FRDR is very much a collaborative effort, which is part of what makes it such a special project and a great product, is that it's a collaboration among the libraries. So as Patrick mentioned, I'm with AceNet as a research consultant for data management, but I'm also with Portage, which is a national library organization focused on solving issues around RDM, or research data management. And so this has very much been a collaboration among the research data management as well as advanced research computing spheres that's involved multiple institutions, libraries, and federal organizations. Primarily, it's been a partnership between Compute Canada and, of course, WestGrid, and the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, which is Portage's parent organization. We're an initiative of CARL. It's hosted on Compute Canada hardware and infrastructure, with Compute Canada providing the development and technical support, and most but not all of the development and technical support have actually come from WestGrid and the team at the University of Saskatchewan. So Adam McKenzie is here in the audience today. And if this weren't virtual, I would ask him to give a wave. Hosted on Compute Canada hardware and infrastructure, with development and technical support coming from Compute Canada WestGrid, and the service being operated by Portage and the library community. And this includes things like data curation and data management support, directly working with researchers on our campuses, with steering and input from the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, as well as the Portage network of expertise and individual institutions. So the network of expertise is made up of about 115 plus now volunteer members from across academic institutions, primarily libraries, that are made up of information professionals dealing with research data, the sort of most pressing issues right now in the research data management sphere. And I'd be happy to give another talk later on just about Portage if there's desire for that. Next slide. Thank you. So the first pillar for FRDR is this idea of discovery. So in addition to being a data repository in our own right, we also harvest metadata from existing repositories in Canada to make research data that are held across these various repositories discoverable from a single search platform. To do this, we currently support several different standards that are there on the slide. And as we encounter new repositories that aren't using any of the standards that our harvester currently supports, we work to try to implement those. And so the idea behind this is that we want to supplement and not supplant existing repositories. There's a lot of good work that's going on in this space. And I think there's always going to be a need for kind of general repositories like FRDR or like your institutional data repositories, whatever platform they may be. But there's also a lot of highly specialized domain-specific repositories, some of which have been going on for a very long time. And so we recognize that a solution is to, again, not try to supplant, but to bring together all of this data under one search platform so that from the end user experience, we can find Canadian research data just in one place. And a part of that is kind of breaking down repository siloing. So again, there will always be a vast landscape of interoperating repositories, and we need to make sure that it's all kind of discoverable from a single place. And so right now, we're harvesting 30-plus repositories. You can go on the FRDR main page and take a look at the list of repositories that we are currently harvesting from. If anyone on this call does that and sees that there's a repository they know of that should be there but isn't, please do let us know. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So the second part of FRDR is actual deposit. So in addition to being a discovery platform, we're also a repository. And the FRDR repository was built with the idea of scalability in mind. So that means two things primarily. The first is that we want to be able to contend with very large data deposits, because we think as you kind of peer even 3 to 5 years down the line, the way science is progressing and becoming increasingly data intensive, you have to imagine that the publication outputs of research are going to become increasingly large. And so we wanted to have a repository technology that was kind of future-proofing and capable of handling very large deposits. And we do that with a mechanism that most people on this call are probably already familiar with. That's the Globus file transfer system. And that is on our what we use on the back end to actually ingest research data. And the second piece of the scalability is that storage in FRDR can be geographically distributed. So that means that if an institution already has their own storage, they can easily connect it into FRDR for discovery on a national platform, or storage could be more centrally managed through infrastructure providers, for example, Compute Canada. And right now, our storage and our VMs currently are part of, I believe, Compute Canada West Cloud. And ideally, again, on the theme of not trying to supplant, but rather supplement, it's a place for researchers to go if they don't have an appropriate local that's at their institution or domain-specific option. Again, we don't want to turn people away from using repositories that are already in use or endorsed by their domains if they have those options. But we do know that there is a gap here, and we need to be prepared to have another option for researchers. And in addition, we're also compliant with the internationally recognized FAIR best practices. Next slide. Thank you. And so the third kind of pillar for FRDR is this idea of preservation processing. For that, we use a tool called Archivematica. And what that does is allow us to process research data for long-term usability of data sets. And it's essentially a file normalization process where it converts research data into what archivists believe are more future-friendly formats. So just as an example, it might move a proprietary format into a more open standard as possible. And the output of that is what's called an archival information package. This contains the original data, and all the associated metadata in a nice, neat package that then can be taken by archivists or what we call preservation service providers for very long-term or archival storage. And that's sort of the deep storage, a copy of last resort that is expected to live for many years. And one of the things that our team has done that's pretty exciting is we've worked a lot with Archivematica to make it more scalable. So when we first started with the tool, it wasn't a great fit necessarily for research data because it wasn't able to handle very large files or large volumes. And so we've done a lot of work to parallelize it over multiple VMs in the CompuCanada cloud to the point where we're very nearly at the point where we can accept sort of unlimited file size or numbers of files, which is very exciting. Next slide. So right now, FRDR is in what we're calling limited production. That means that it's live. You can go to the URL provided at the beginning of this presentation. You can use it to search across all the harvested Canadian repositories that we talked about, and also download data sets that are stored in FRDR. You can search for and find data that lives in other repositories. But really what we're doing there is driving the traffic back to those repositories. And so whether or not you can actually access the data will be dependent on their policies. But you can discover it. And at this point, data deposit is restricted to a select number of research groups that are working with us as limited production partners. And this isn't a beta or a pilot. Whatever data that we ingest at this time will be discoverable and accessible into and beyond the full service launch. So it's very much technically a production-ready system, and what we're doing is working with groups to help us refine our service ahead of a full production release. Next slide. So this is just to give you a very quick taste of some of the groups that are working with us. Our groups very much range from very large, multi-institutional, for example, CFRF-funded projects to smaller projects. It runs the range in terms of disciplines from physical sciences to social sciences to digital humanities and even traditional humanities, which is great because we're learning to work with the wide breadth of research that currently exists out there. And it's becoming increasingly more digital across almost all sectors, including the humanities. And so we're learning to work with different file types and trying to figure out service models that work well for individual researchers, for example, as well as very large research groups who may want to have a larger degree of control, for example, over things like data deposit and data curation. And I'm happy to say that we are still accepting new partners for limited production. So if there's anyone on the call listening who knows of a research group or is a researcher themselves who might want to make use of FRDR services, my contact information is there on the first slide, and I urge you to please send me an email. And that's all I had for that. I'll be happy to take questions.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. I think that's great. I think it's a really exciting project, this one. It's been going for, I think, a couple of years now, right? It's
That's right,
development and the team at University of Saskatchewan who have been really very supportive of it. And I certainly kind of like it. Just it's a very Canadian federated project,
yes.
The federal system. And so I think this kind of approach could be really powerful. And of course, everybody is worried about what you do with your research data now, and we've got granting agencies with requirements and regulations for research data plans and such.
That's
so
right.
this is, I think, it really fits within the kind of Compute Canada and the advanced research computing end of things.
Yes,
and
I think
it's a really
so
good
too.
approach. Yeah.
Yeah, and I will say so, if you'll have noted the new policy that was put out by the tri-agencies where they're asking for consultation. In the FAQ, FRDR is explicitly named as a good option for researchers looking to deposit data. So that's really exciting too.
Yeah, exactly. So any questions for Lee?
What is the timeline, Lee, for putting it into full production, or is there any timeline?
I think we're probably looking at 2019 at this point. Some of it is contingent on the work that was being done last year with the LCDRI, Leadership Council for Digital Research Infrastructure, and the recommendations they put forward to ICED. So right now we're in talks with ICED, more are planned for the end of the summer, to talk about priority funding. A lot of the research that's been done in this area suggests that a repository at this scale really does require some degree of sustained federal funding, some kind of federal buy-in. And so we don't want to say we're going to launch this in full production without having that, but we are exploring other kind of service and business models as well. So I would say we plan to continue limited production through the summer into the fall, and then looking at full launch sometime in 2019. But the idea is to kind of continuously ramp up our limited production, which is purposely why we're not calling it a pilot. We very much do want to have more researchers using it right now as well. So,
cool. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Lee, and you're welcome to stay around and listen in as we go along.
Sure. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Right, so I'll take over at this point and just talk a little bit, just a few slides about the upcoming resource allocation competition. And the point here really is that it is coming up shortly. And as usual, there are all sorts of other granting councils and agencies having competitions in the next, over the autumn. So researchers have to sort of juggle their time a bit. Well, it's always a good idea to get started as early as you can. The tentative dates are up on this slide. So we're kind of hoping that the application guides, the updated application guides will be available late next month. And then the submission forms and website will be up at the moment predicted September 19th. And you can see that the submission dates, November 8th for the research, RRG, what the heck is that? No, I've forgotten.
Resources for research groups.
Resources for research groups, and RPP, the research platforms and portals. We have the two programs, and we're not changing those programs this year, so the same kind of approach as last year. So November 8th, and one can start working on them September 19th. And then, as usual, if all goes well, in January and February, we'll be doing all the reviews and the reviewers in November, in fact December too, and everything should start up again next April. So as usual, we're starting the allocation year in April. And just to note that out-of-round applications are still available if there are new faculty who really need an allocation right now. We get a few of those coming in. And just a quick note again about the resources that are going to be available. The really great thing is that Beluga, the GP4 system, has actually been ordered. I'm not allowed to say yet much in the way of any of the details. That's still confidential information. But it'll be similar size to Graham, and certainly have up-to-date modern CPUs, and similarly for a range of GPUs. This is really great because it's the order is actually there. So now we're on much better ground. Those schedule points are just my quick estimates. These are not official, but I figure then since it's been ordered, we'll get delivery sometime in a couple of months, 3 months, something like that, and then installation and testing, beta testing maybe later in the winter. And then if all goes well, should be ready to go in April. So that's great. We'll have a significant addition to the available RAC resources. However, the bad news is that legacy systems will be defunded. They were funded for this year as a bit of an emergency note from CFI, who agreed to continue to fund a few systems while we get GP4 on. In particular, in WestGrid, you may know Orsinus is continuing on at UBC. Many thanks to UBC for also agreeing to host Orsinus for another year. But Orsinus is scheduled for defunding on March 31st. That's 10,000 cores right there. Now, they're old cores, and the new cores will be much faster, but we'll be losing some significant resources too. So overall, I'm expecting maybe a bit more than a small increase in the number of cores available, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more GPUs. And if you recall, in RAC 2018, we got asked for about 5 times as many GPUs as we actually had available. So getting a really significant increase in the number of GPUs would be great. But overall, I'm thinking that we'll have pretty much the same competitive environment for Compute Canada resources as we've had over the last few years. So kind of similar kinds of success rates, and just emphasizes again that it's a good idea to really work hard and get a really good proposal coming in if you want really significant resources. But in that case, you should want to start thinking about status reports and where that's going to go. And I put a last one in there. I have talked about nearline storage, I think, over and over again. And about this time last year, I think at the WestGrid town hall, I said that I was reasonably confident that nearline would be available for this year. Well, it's not yet. It's turned out that nearline is actually really quite difficult to get things going. And remember that nearline is that ability to move valuable but inactive data somewhere where we can offload it to tape, to nice cheap storage. And then when you want it back, you can go and look at a stub, access it, and the tape system will try to automatically bring it back. Of course, response times might be slow, but it'll be back on tape. But things like having multiple copies on tape and maybe geo-replicated copies, we want to make sure that data is very solidly stored, even if it's inactive and not immediately available. We decided earlier this year that the nearline project should have high priority. So 2 pilot projects have been completed. We're pretty sure we may actually go for both of them in different environments. But so I'm hopefully reasonably confident that we will actually have nearline capability shortly. And in fact, Niagara already has some in operation. That's the SciNet Toronto's large parallel system, and you can do some things with their system. But this would be great, and so again, the sort of point here is, yeah, if you can start to look into that and see if you've got a lot of data. Of course, generally cleaning up is always a good idea, stuff that you haven't used for a long time. Yeah, so getting started on RAC, I think, it's about right. Now, we will be doing our WestGrid best practices for RAC. You know, we have some stuff there, and we'll be probably trying to do that in September. So keep an eye on that. Remember, the RAC opens on September 19th. So somewhere in there, we'll be doing a series of WestGrid best practices, and there are going to be individual site presentations as well. So keep an eye on that. When we know more, we'll be able to give you a lot of the details and really start talking about how you can maximize your chances of getting a good allocation. Oh, there was a question about, can work on nearline converge with work on FRDR? That's an interesting question. I don't think we've ever thought about that. At the moment, no. It's very much inactive storage that has been used on the existing clusters can go somewhere to cheap storage. We haven't put the two together, but I think that would actually be kind of a big project. I would doubt that well, we can think about it. I think the answer here is I'll think about it. Thanks, good question. Right, I think that's about it for RAC. Say just a brief, quick note that yeah, time to start thinking about it, and keep an eye out for announcements as they come out. And then we've got a few WestGrid announcements, which are really kind of nice. We talked about GP4, but Cedar, the SFU system, was expanded, and that expansion is complete. And that essentially doubled the size of Cedar. So that was a huge expansion. And it's that row right at the bottom of this list, 640 Skylake nodes with 48 cores per node. So big cores. And about 180 gig RAM per node. So that's great. They're in operation, and of course, some interesting scheduling issues because as you can see just in the diagram, in the table, there are many different kinds of nodes. So whether you got large mem, small mem, whether you're using GPUs, and there are different kinds of GPUs with different memory. So the scheduler tries to take that into account when you define your jobs. But that's running, and these nodes are in operation. So my congratulations to the Cedar team. That's essentially like installing a whole new system, putting in all the hardware, getting it all installed, doing the RFPs, all that, and it's taken, I think, about less than a year overall, I think, from the original orders. So it's great to see that, and I say that's a very welcome expansion for the kind of systems that we've got. So 60,000 cores. It's a big system now. And on that line, the actual expansion became available on April 15th. Then, as you can see on this usage diagram, from the expansion, there's been a steady ramp up. There was a major outage, May 28th to June 1st, a few days for some system updates because of that expansion and such. I think we didn't actually give sufficient notice for that outage, but I'll be talking about the next outage on this meeting so that we start to try to improve that. At the moment, some of these outages just happen because of security and such, and we just have to bring things down. So anyhow, we went from 24 to 60,000 cores. Here's the Cedar GPU usage. I mentioned this at the last town hall, that rather interestingly, we were looking at about 50% usage of the GPUs, and we were kind of interested in that because this is the jobs were asking for 100% of the GPUs, 100% of resources. It's just when we actually looked at usage, they were only using about half. Now, these are 4 GPUs per node, so I think, and I think this shows it, that it's difficult for packages and applications to use 4 GPUs per node, and everybody is learning. And rather interestingly, when I did the same thing with Graham in SharkNet in Waterloo, they have 2 GPUs per node, and they were showing upwards of 80 or 90% usage. So just a little bit. So I think it's been that just so many GPUs hung on each Cedar node. But as you can see, kind of overall here, there's a general increase in that. We're kind of peaking up to about 70% now. And so I think that applications, users are getting more and more experienced and beginning to much more efficiently use the Cedar GPU nodes. So this is kind of good news. I was pleased to see this kind of graph as things begin to ramp up. Note that in the expansion, we didn't add any GPUs. The expansion was only CPUs. Let's see, Lindsay has said, yeah, peak performance on Cedar is about 5.2 petaflops. Yeah, so big machine. Right, and then just looking at the future a bit, outages and issues. The Arbutus Cloud will have a July 22nd, just next week, short BCNet outage. That's an external one where BCNet is doing some upgrades on their router and network, and so external connections will be affected. That should be one of those really short, 15-minute jobs. Graham, August 21, 24th, they got 4-day major outage, and Cedar will also have another major outage, probably at the end of August. Those both outages are mostly to do with operating system upgrades. The existing OS is not supported, and we have to move to the latest versions. For these big machines, that kind of change is a big change. One has to completely re-image all the machines, all the nodes, and that just takes a while when you're talking about thousands of nodes. And Graham, they're also upgrading their power systems. And one of the issues is that when you change the kernel and the operating system, you also have to change the Lustre shared file system. clients and make sure that each node can indeed mount the shared file system. And the reason why I can't give you a date for Cedar of end of August is that the guys are still looking at, or still testing and working on the Lustre client to see if it will work properly with the new operating system version. So they're kind of predicting end of August, but I think that's pretty much. It'll be 4 days. That's a big outage. And I know Orsinus, August 25th, they'll be their UBC is doing a power systems maintenance weekend, so they'll be out for a couple of days there. And then the expansion on the Arbutus cloud they're doing some big changes in the way that expansion is going to be organized. We've got Ryan is going to talk about that shortly. So that'll happen probably in September. And then, as usual, scheduling is always our problem. Is Ryan here? Ryan, are you around?
Yeah.
Ryan was going to be a bit late.
Oh, wait, maybe I have to unmute you. Okay. Oh, how about now?
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm getting some feedback.
Yeah. Everyone can make sure they're muted. There we go.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Ryan Engie. I'm the site lead for the Arbutus team. I'm also the lead of the cloud national team. This is a very exciting time for the Arbutus team because in addition to the expansion of our cloud capacity, we are also re-architecting our cloud deployment completely, taking the lessons learned from operating infrastructure as a service cloud over the last 8 years and OpenStack clouds over the last 4 years, and deploying a completely new cloud. So we will be using the latest OpenStack release, Queens, with a new deployment system, which allows us to stay better up to date with releases. We expect that we'll always be on the current release or the previous release. So that's definitely something that we want to achieve. In addition, we're going to be having more frequent patching of all the infrastructure, which will be for security and bug fixes. So that's increased security and stability within the cloud platform. We're working on a continuous integration and a continuous development system for mostly automated updates, so from a dev environment and to our production environment, which is going to allow for more time for the team to focus on deploying new services to our users instead of focusing on doing the upgrades and fixing bugs and working around bugs that we have right now. So we're also looking at adding availability zones, and so this is for people that want to run redundant services and they want to know that their instances are actually in physically different racks within the data center. So that means they're attached to different breakers, different PDUs. Right now, the only ability you have is to just ask that they're on different nodes, but they could end up being in the same chassis or in the same rack. So this is definitely a step forward on providing HA services from our clients. The new monitoring and alerting infrastructure is going to give us better end-to-end cloud functional testing, which will allow us to detect and resolve issues a lot quicker. So with the alerting we have now, we don't always get notified that there's an issue, and so it's up to a client that may submit a ticket to say that there's a problem. So this will test the functionality of the cloud and create tickets when something goes wrong. And then we're also going to have better metrics to detect performance issues and bottlenecks in the cloud platform. And this will allow us to either bring up new resources or move resources around to make sure that the cloud is performing as we want it to. On the performance and scalability and stability side, so the updated OpenStack version, and then we're also increasing the number of management nodes in our infrastructure. So that's going to provide that base level increase for everything. But we expect that we'll have lower latency on API calls, we'll have the ability to boot more instances at the same time, and we'll have improved stability on attaching multiple volumes to an instance, which is an issue for some people right now. We also have the new generation of CPUs coming in with our Skylake node, so that's the 1400 compute cores that are coming in hopefully at the end of this month. And we're also adding some nodes with SSDs. So for people that require some really high IOPS local storage, that will be something new that we have in our cloud. Another big win will be we're going to be enabling the NUMA awareness in our C flavors. So this will provide better performance for batch style workloads, HPC type workloads that are running in our cloud. So that's a big win for users on the performance side. And then just because we're upgrading, it gives us access to a bunch of new features and options that will allow us to scale the cloud moving forward. So this is excellent. The timeline for all of this work is going to be sometime in mid to late September, and that will depend on delivery of equipment and availability of equipment. So unfortunately, we've had some delays in our equipment delivery, and so that's why it's pushed our upgrade. We were hoping to have it before the end of the summer. So at this point, if there's no further delays, it'll be sometime around mid to late September. So we can move on to the next slide. Can everybody hear me okay? Because I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Okay. All right, so on the migration, so as Patrick mentioned in the outage slide, there's not actually going to be a cloud outage. Instead, we've opted for deploying a totally new separate cloud. So this is going to be a new URL, so rebranding, which will be in line. Instead of using WestCloud for the Arbutus site, which is very confusing, I think, to a lot of people, the site's going to be rebranded as Arbutus. So it'll just be the one name from now on. So a new URL for dashboard access, and same with the command line. So if you're using the command line to boot instances, you're going to have to make some changes there as far as the API endpoints. And Keystone itself is getting updated to version 3, so there's some changes that happen within the file there as well. And as I mentioned, the migration will be required. So you're going to bring up instances. I mean, at a high level, basically, your project's going to be provisioned in the new cloud. You're going to copy over any base images that you need or start from a fresh base image. You're going to install and configure your services in that new image. Then you're going to migrate data from WestCloud over to Arbutus Cloud, update any DNS that you have, and then decommission and delete anything that's running in the old cloud. So we're going to have a webinar on this in early September. We chose that date because we thought a lot of people might be away for the summer, so more likely that we'll have better attendance in early September. It's going to be one of our cloud experts, Venkat from UBC, that's going to be presenting this. He's going to walk through the changes in the user interface, talk about some of the new features that are going to be available to the users, and then go through a sample migration. So I think this should be very informative for our users. And of course, as always, if there's any questions about this process, you can reach out to cloud@computecanada.ca, which is our ticketing system. And we're providing information on our wiki there, which I've put the link in, that's going to be updated throughout the summer. And we'll also have a link to our webinar from that wiki doc once it's been completed, because we'll make sure to record it. And next slide. So finally, this is breaking news as of just this morning. We've been working on a cloud user survey now for some time, and we literally just got it finished this morning. So those are the 2 URLs for the survey, one in English, one in French. There should be an email sent out later today or hopefully on Monday at the latest. We're really looking for user feedback about their cloud experience, how it's working for them, if it's not working for them, what they're doing on the cloud, if there's new features that you're looking at getting. So we're really looking forward to feedback, and we would really encourage our cloud users to provide us this feedback, because it's really going to push, once we've done our new deployment, it's going to really push what we focus on sort of in the next 6 months after the cloud is deployed. And as Patrick mentioned, we are having a VCNet outage on Sunday, July 22nd from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific. So this is impacting the external network connectivity to the Arbutus cloud itself. The actual outage, they're saying, will be 15 to 30 minutes because they actually have to reboot the router during that time. So it'll be sometime during that 4-hour window, so it's not a 4-hour outage. And if you have any questions, you can, I guess, ask them here right now, or we can chat offline. Is Patrick muted?
Oh, maybe. Your presenter view is multi-kinks. Hold on, Patrick.
Good. Okay, it says I'm not muted now. Good. Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks, Ryan. That's great. Great update, and say really exciting things happening on this line too. So so that's going to be really interesting to see how the new version of the cloud comes out. And I think that continuous integration stuff is a brilliant approach, and it's really good that we can get into that. Yeah, so I'm going to turn it over now to Aaron. We've had a WestGrid survey, and Aaron's going to finish off our town hall today by reviewing some of the results. So over to you, Aaron.
Right, yeah, we had a survey we issued the end of 2017. It was a follow-up from the survey we issued the previous year. The purpose kind of just being a check-in, see how we're doing in terms of meeting everyone's needs, and measure some KPIs from the previous year. So the first slide, just a note, you can actually undock the screen share view, and you can resize it if needed to view some of the smaller numbers in there. But yeah, we got great response, higher than last year, 283 respondents, up 8% from 2016. And the respondent profile was pretty consistent with our general user profile overall. Go to the next slide. So, you know, again, one of the main questions, what is most important, not including basic raw compute and support staff time. Those obviously being probably top of most people's list. Long-term data storage, something we've repeatedly heard. It's currently not funded under our CFI, MSI funding, but there's definitely an increasing demand for this. File sharing services, obviously collaboration between institutions, provinces, internationally is increasing ongoing. And the large shared memory systems. So we used to have Hungary at the U of A, which is no longer there, so still some that resource. Other services, this is kind of similar to what we heard last year. Just some more tools that can reduce some of the barriers to access for the new users. So an account job management tool, so users have a bit more control over the jobs they submit. Version control was repeatedly noted. Interactive computing, definitely we see a growth in this need. And just general things to make it a bit easier to access. So next slide. We asked a question prompted actually by Compute Canada in terms of how people anticipate their needs are going to change in the next 5 years. So you can see here CPU and storage both projected by people to increase at least twice as much, if not more than double. And GPU is a little bit less than that, surprisingly, but obviously the trend is just going to keep going up. So hopefully we can take some of these stats forward to the funders and get a bit more resources on the floor. Next slide. So we asked about a user support, and the number of people that have accessed the support in the past year has increased from last year. It's up to 74% this past year. A lot of that driven by the migration off the new systems, likely. But the satisfaction ratings with our support remain really high. 99% found the support service helpful, and 97% found it timely. The timeliness decreased a little bit, but again, this is likely due to there's a much higher number of support tickets with the new systems, and our staff was pretty busy last year getting the new systems up and running. Most people think they have enough support in their specific domain. Some areas that would like more is the medical, biological, life sciences, the environmental sciences, and the humanities. Only about 50% feel they have adequate local ARC support, so on-campus support. This is down a little bit from last year, down 6%. But consistent with last year, the number of comments and details provided on how support staff have helped researchers was fantastic. It was just phenomenal. And that was one of the most consistent feedback was just the great level of support that our staff provide. Specific mentions to staff at the U of A, UVic, and also Manitoba. So that's really great. Next slide. Good to see that some of the awareness of the specialized services that WestGrid offers for support is increasing across the board from last year. Got some information on what kind of user training people are looking for, parallel programming, data visualization, GPUs and CUDA right up there. And then just some stats on our website and some good feedback on how we can improve it. Again, more new user support was a big thing that we heard. Next slide. Tremendous feedback, similar to last year. There's so many long answers and great details, suggestions, constructive criticism. So it was just really tremendously useful and will definitely help feed into our planning going forward. Next slide. So we wanted to kind of compare these results with the renewal survey that was conducted by Compute Canada in April. Every person with a Compute Canada account, in order to renew their account, had to fill out a short survey about their industrial partnerships over the past year that were enabled by Compute Canada, and some general questions about satisfaction. So just looking about the share of users based in the WestGrid region, we've got about 30% of all Compute Canada users as of April 2018 were based in the West. Unfortunately, the satisfaction ratings, so this is the satisfaction with Compute Canada, so it's always unclear, what users are viewing as WestGrid versus Compute Canada. But you can see, even though we made up 30%, we're disproportionately high on the lower end of the satisfaction scale. Likely this is because WestGrid systems were the first ones to be defunded. Our users kind of experienced the most of the pains in terms of migrating their data, the delays in the new systems, and just the growing pains in getting the new systems up and running, getting used to the scheduler, etc. Next slide. But again, here you can kind of look at the satisfaction ratings and the results of them by province and also by the other regions. So international users are the most satisfied with Compute Canada. But yeah, just a metric to keep an eye on. This has decreased slightly for WestGrid as well compared to last year. So it'll be interesting to see where things end up next year. Next slide. And just kind of comparing our WestGrid survey satisfaction ratings versus the Compute Canada Renewals one. And you can see there is definitely a difference in the ratings. Another thing to note with Compute Canada is users with a RAC in general were less satisfied with Compute Canada. WestGrid users with a RAC were the most dissatisfied with Compute Canada. A lot of comments included some perceptions of an unfair allocation process or favoring different types of researchers or types of research, bigger jobs over smaller ones. So I think that's one of the reasons that we decided to really push these RAC outreach sessions with users, just to kind of provide as much support as we can with the RAC process and how to fill out an application, how to make sure you're not missing really important information that could hurt your final score. So we'll continue to do that this year. And next slide. But what is really fantastic to note is that the industry activity reported by researchers based in WestGrid is the highest of any single consortium in any region on all markers. So even though we're only 30% of all the users, we far outweigh our reported collaborations and activity based on using Compute Canada resources. In fact, UBC was the highest of any single institution, and U of A was the third highest of any single institution. So these are really fantastic metrics. These are much higher, I think, than we've seen in the past. Yeah, it's really fantastic how strong the industrial activity and collaborations are in the West. So definitely something to highlight and to try to support, going forward. Next one. So yeah, just some of the feedback that was presented in the longer answers. lot of users not happy with the survey. You know, it was a mandatory survey. It was linked directly to their account. So, you know, we have to report on this for our reports to CFI. So it's not always an option, but there's definitely improvements that we can make going forward. Migration, RAC, and of course the complaint that there's still not enough resources. Queues are too long, and there's not enough GPUs, etc. Some good suggestions too: community support forum for users to, you know, have another avenue to access help with any questions they have. Some longer wall times and a bit more cloud support, especially for the less traditional users. Okay, next slide. Just some general updates. Alex Razumov is here. He's going to talk a little bit about our summer schools that recently happened.
Okay, thank you, Erin. So we do a lot of training in WestGrid, both during the academic year and in the summer. And last month we organized 2 summer schools, one at UBC and one at the University of Manitoba. And these schools attracted in total about 250 attendees. We offered a range of either full day or half day courses from introductory HPC to programming to running virtual machines in the cloud, some domain-specific sessions, visualization, and we also had contributed courses from 3 commercial companies. So all materials from this year's summer schools are now posted online. You can find these on our training materials page that I'll mention in a couple of slides. So next year, we are also organizing 2 summer schools. The locations are going to be announced during the academic year, and we got lots of feedback from the attendees this year. So there were requests for additional topics. So some of them are programming in Julia, code optimization, more bioinformatics topics. So we're looking into these, and we, if we find instructors, we'll try to offer more courses. Next slide, please. We started running the Visualize These competition in 2016, so we've run it for 2 years now. And the goals of this competition is to draw attention to popular open source visualization tools, and also find innovative visualization techniques that we just didn't think of ourselves. So last year we had some fantastic submissions, and we gave out vendor prizes to 3 winners. This year we're doing something similar, and we are thinking about 2 tracks where we'll be providing 1 molecular dynamics dataset and 1 humanities dataset to visualize. So please keep an eye on our webpage, westgrid.ca, and also your mailbox for an announcement sometime in mid-September. Next slide, please. And this is the training page that I mentioned. So the URL is right there on the screen. We now put all materials, all training materials there, and it's regularly updated. So to programming guides, to various domain topics, things like humanities and social science, various tools, things like visualization, scheduling, etc. It's all available there. And you can also see the link to the summer school materials at the top. So please visit this webpage. There's tons and tons of materials there. So I think that's all I have. I'll pass the microphone back to Erin.
Thanks, Alex. So just another quick shout out to 2 of our WestGrid-based support staff who received Compy Canada Awards of Excellence this past June, presented at SFU for the CanHeight Cuccio Conference. The first one goes to, actually they're both at U of A. So Career Achievement Award to Masao from the University of Alberta. Unfortunately just retired this May, so he wasn't there to accept it in person. But in the number of nominations that he received, the stories that researchers shared of how he's helped him, and the number of comments we've had of people really sad that he's no longer around, and it's definitely a big gap. But we also wanted to acknowledge Camille Marcinkowski from the University of Alberta, who won the Team Choice Awards. These were awards nominated by his peers within Compy Canada. So feel free to read the story online, and congratulations to both of them. Next slide. And a quick reminder, just our website, check regularly with lots of news items in there, ARC News, HQP, career postings, conferences that are coming up, So there's an events page, there's research profiles on users of our systems and what they're doing with the resources. So it's a great place to find out some information. And next one, great. That's it for us. Contact us anytime. Feel free to have any questions now. You can chat them in, send them to us, support@westgrid.ca or info@westgrid.ca. Check out our websites. We're always looking for ideas for new training sessions, working to advocate for more resources, more support, so contact us anytime.
Yep, thanks Aaron, and thanks everyone for joining us. That was probably one of our longest town halls ever, but such exciting things happening with FRDR and the new expansions and the cloud and GP4, so it's going to be a very interesting year, I think. Thanks everyone.